Welcome to the Valley Nature Center. I'm Mike, and today I'm going to lead you on a walk through our park to show you some of the features that make us a nature center. Right now we're standing at the wetland pond, and in the pond we have a number of creatures and plants. The two turtles that we have that are dominant here are the red-eared slider, called a red-eared slider because it actually has red patches on the side of its head where the ears would normally be. In addition, there is a spiny soft-shell turtle. It's a little bit bigger turtle and has a snout kind of like a pig and a very soft and smooth shell. The spiny soft shells live about 50 years. The red-eared sliders live between 20 and 30 years. Both of these turtle species, the red-eared slider and the spiny softshell, are native to the southern United States and to Texas and in northern Mexico. In addition, in our pond here we have the very, very small fish. Some people refer to them as minnows, but we call them mosquito fish because they actually eat the larvae of mosquitoes, which lay their eggs in the water. In addition, we have some Rio Grande perch, also called Texas cichlid. They get up to about 10 inches in length. People do fish for them and eat them. We don't here, but we do have those in the pond as well, and they're easily seen especially when we feed the turtles and the fish. I think we'll head on down the path now. Okay, as we enter the part of the park with more vegetation, we see a great variety of plants. And that great variety of plants is necessary in order to maintain the diversity of animals that we have in the park. We maintain that diversity partially through our own plantings, and of course the animals themselves help plant some of the plants that we'll see in the park. The plants themselves are a miracle, in my opinion, because they have adapted to the South Texas climate. Remember that in South Texas we don't get a lot of water. Weslaco gets an average of about 25 inches a year, which is not a lot compared to the rest of the United States, or much of the rest of the United States. Consequently, the plants have to be adapted to not much water. They have to use what they can get to efficiently. In addition to that fact, however, when we do get rain, often it's in torrents or floods. So the plants also have to be adapted to withstanding the flood, because a lot of plants will drown if they're inundated with too much water. Our plants have adapted to where they can deal with both, and we'll take a look at some of the plants on our way through the park. Yeah, here's the butterfly feeder here. We're going to talk about I love this plant. We're at the intersection of the butterfly trail with the trail that we're on, and at the entrance to the butterfly trail we have what looks like a bird swing here, but it's actually what we use as a butterfly feeder. You don't actually have to have a feeder. You can use the bark of a tree, but we use this feeder because we put a little trough in it to make sure that the food has a place to stabilize. What we use is a butterfly brew, which you can find online, but basically it's a combination of rotten fruit, perhaps not completely rotten, but certainly very, very ripe, such as overripe bananas. Include in that brown sugar and dark foreign beer. Our butterflies seem to prefer Guinness or Negra Modelo. So we mix those together and we let them ferment a little bit, and then we fill this right here. You don't want to fill it too deep because we don't want the butterflies to get mired in it, but just deep enough to form a thin layer here, and the butterflies will sort of belly up to the bar, as we say, and feed right here in this butterfly feeder. One of the plants that we have in abundance in the Nature Center is the Turk's Cap. The Drummond's Turk's Cap grows very well in the sun and blooms very well in the sun, but it'll also grow and bloom in the shade, just not quite as prolifically as it does in the sun. But it is a great plant to attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and lots of other nectar-feeding insects. We've now arrived at one of the several water features that we have in the park. As you notice, the water is making considerable sound. Some of them make more, some of them make less, and that's important. As we mentioned previously, South Texas doesn't get a copious amount of rainwater, so it's important that the animals that are in the park, or that are in the park permanently, or that are just visiting, are able to find the water quickly. And the sound of the rushing water, or even a trickle, the dripping of water, helps them identify where the water is, especially when the park is quiet, and that way they can get to the water much more efficiently. One of the plants that many of you are probably familiar with is the tropical plumbago, which gets large clusters of blue flowers. Many people have those planted in their home lawns. However, there is a native Texas plumbago, and here's a little branch of one right here. And the interesting thing about the plumbago, be it tropical or native, is that the seeds are actually encased in something akin to Velcro. So as an animal or human passes by, those seeds will stick to their clothing or to the fur of the animal, and that's how this plant disperses its seeds around our park or around whatever landscape it happens to be found in. This is normally where our herons' nests are, but I think the storm took them all out. Because this is normally, we have 5 or 6 herons' nests up in here. I know that tree fell and the one over there fell. We've now arrived at the feature that will help us identify what kind of bird you would be according to your wingspan if you happen to find your way to our park. We have a chachalaca, a yellow-crowned heron, an osprey, a turkey vulture, and a bald eagle. What you do is you step up here, you stretch your own wings once you've situated yourself in the middle to see what kind of bird has a wingspan that matches your arm span, I guess. And I think mine's probably in the turkey vulture range. Let's see. Yes, a turkey vulture range, and I've been called a turkey many times, so that seems appropriate. From here, I'm going to take the steps up into the bird's nest. And now I'm up in our bird's nest, and of course this is a large bird's nest, much larger than most birds would build, in fact than all birds would build, that exists now. But this is to give particularly our students who visit the park an idea of what it's like to be a baby bird up in the canopy someplace. They're up here primarily for safety, so that predators don't have as easy access to them as they would have normally. This is also a great picture spot for those classes that come to the park. They won't see it. You can hear the water again, which is important for the animals.
That's fine. It's okay. We're gonna pass by like one.
Oh, I know. That was for Abel only. Here we have an example of the diversity of plant life that we have in the park. For example, here we have a type of passion vine that is native to South Texas, and this is a host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly. It does get a small greenish flower on it and a small reddish fruit, but the Gulf fritillary lays its eggs on these leaves, and that's what the caterpillars feed on until they're ready to go into their cocoons. In addition, right here we have a potato tree. And the texture of the potato tree leaf is interesting. It's kind of fuzzy. Students who come to the park often describe it as feeling like felt. Right next to it, we have a small example of a tree that many people call the sandpaper tree, actually called a naqua, which has a texture very different from the potato tree, in that it's very rough, consequently its name sandpaper. The potato tree, by the way, does not produce potatoes. It's called a potato tree because if you break the root, it gives off an aroma somewhat like the aroma of cooked potatoes. The texture on these two leaves, although very different, serve a similar purpose in that they help the leaf retain moisture, and the texture also discourages some insect pests. What looks like here, we've arrived where we've got a Texas tortoise. Let me see if we can pull him out here. Yes, this is a Texas tortoise, a species native to Texas, obviously. It is an identified threatened species in Texas, so it is against the law to collect or to keep them as pets. However, fortunately, we have a habitat here in the park that is conducive to their reproducing, and so we have a number of these tortoises in our park. We're going to let him find his way. If by chance you run across a Texas tortoise on the highway and it seems to be in danger of being run over, and you decide to help it cross the roadway, whether by pushing it with your foot or if you have to because of the amount of traffic picking it up, be sure to carry it in the direction in which it was going, because if you don't, it's simply going to turn around and cross back in the direction that it was going in the first place. Okay, here we are. We've got 3 different feeding stations here. Let me see. Yeah, here's a nail here. I can use that. Now we've arrived at one of the several feeding stations in the park. We primarily are feeding the birds here, but the rabbits and squirrels and a few other critters take advantage of it as well. First of all, you see here a hummingbird feeder. Now, for the hummingbird feeder, we use a mixture of sugar and water, usually 1 part sugar to 3 or 4 parts water, depending on how often we want the hummingbirds to visit the feeder. The sugar water for the hummingbird performs somewhat as a candy bar would for us. So this gives the hummingbird quick energy so that it can go out and hunt its protein, shall we say, which is usually some sort of flying insect. So the hamburger is the flying insect, but in order to have the energy to race after that hamburger, we have this candy bar or sugar water in the hummingbird feeder. In addition, we have some nails put into this particular branch here, and on these nails, we generally place either a half section of orange or grapefruit. Many of our birds, particularly the chachalacas, enjoy both the oranges and the grapefruit. They will not eat lemons or limes, but they do enjoy the grapefruit and oranges. And finally, we have this platform feeder where we place seeds, usually black oil sunflower seeds. That's the most popular. But the chachalacas will also feed on cracked corn, so that some of that ends up in here and also on the ground. And of course the sunflower seed on the ground as well. There are other seeds occasionally that end up here, but primarily we use the black oil sunflower and some cracked corn. The black oil sunflower is the most efficient because our greatest number of birds will enjoy that. Now you'll see the feeding stations at various levels, because some birds prefer to feed on the ground, some birds prefer to feed down low but in branches, and some of them prefer to feed up high. In addition to the actual feeders that you see here, or feeding stations, we use various parts of this branch for another food source, which we use being peanut butter. The peanut butter we simply smear on the log. Now you can make a peanut butter feeder, but it's easy just to smear it on a log or branch. And many birds will eat peanut butter. I was surprised at how many different species, once they discovered the peanut butter, would enjoy it. Not only the chachalacas, but mockingbirds, kiskadees, even, of course, the sparrows will eat almost anything. I think they're omnivorous. And many other species, once they discover the peanut butter, will consume it, sometimes voraciously. We've arrived at our cactus garden, but there are a lot of things in here in addition to cactus. For example, here is another example of our native passion vine. the host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly. And over here, as you would expect, we have a cactus, and actually there's a small palm tree coming up. So let's focus first on the palm tree. You might want to move over here so you can see this. I don't know that we'll find a better example. This is a good example, it's just a little bit hidden. Now this is an emerging palm tree. It's obviously young, and it looks more like grass than a palm tree. And there's a reason for that, because the palm tree actually, although we call it a tree because of the size that it achieves, it's really not a tree at all. It's an ancient and giant form of grass. So as it develops, it's going to develop a fibrous core, unlike the rings that you would see in a tree. You're going to see fiber more like a grass than you would see in a tree. On this cactus here, this is a native cactus, a night blooming cereus. Now that's an interesting thing to explore because it does bloom at night. It has a gorgeous bloom about this big, white and cream bloom. But it does bloom at night. In the morning, it begins, in the light, it begins to shrivel up. Consequently, it has to be, it needs a different kind of animal to pollinate it than our day blooming flowers. For example, during the day, our flowers are pollinated, say, by butterflies or bees or other types of animals. This, because it's blooming at night and the bees and the butterflies are generally not active at night, needs a different pollinator. So moths, which are usually active at night, or bats pollinate those plants that bloom primarily at night. Now the cactus, being more of a desert type or arid type plant, has adapted itself to be able to survive in a very dry climate. These spines here are actually adapted leaves. We say that a cactus has no leaves, but actually they have been adapted over many generations of cactus to these spines here, which help protect the cactus from predators. In addition, the skin of a cactus and a succulent plant is generally thick and rubbery. And this helps the cactus maintain the moisture that is inside. And it gathers moisture because by way of very shallow roots. It has shallow roots so that every time there is moisture on the ground that seeps into the ground, it can gather all of that up, and it doesn't have to wait for it to get deep down like a tree might have to wait a little bit longer. So the cactus roots are shallow so that it can gather more moisture. It stores it, and it keeps from losing it through this waxy, rubbery skin. Right over here, skipping through the trees, and one on the ground, another one on the ground back there. The chachalaca is a medium-sized bird, I guess you would say, about the size of a small chicken or a pheasant. In fact, they're distantly related to both of those. We have a number of them in the park, and in fact we have two that are mottled with white. We're hoping that they will reproduce and that we'll have more of them because that one is particularly rare. Behind me is our waterfall, and although it's trickling right now, again it has water making a sound so as to attract the wildlife. We actually built this from gunite that was donated to us by the Gladys Porter Zoo. After they had completed their animal enclosures, they had some gunite left over, so they donated it to us so that we could build a few structures here in the nature park. Gunite, by the way, is a concrete mixture of sand, cement, and water. And it's blown through a gun to make the various formations that we have here. Now we're going to head on down the brick road here to our nursery. And now we've arrived at the Valley Nature Center Native Plant Nursery. We maintain a large variety of native plants in this nursery for a couple of reasons. One is that when our plants get old or diseased or damaged by storms in the park, in order to maintain the diversity and maintain the home for our various forms of wildlife, we replant so as to restore what we may have lost. In addition, we sell native plants to the public in case they want to use them in their own landscapes. Normally they sell for about $6 for a 1-gallon plant, or during our fall and spring sales for $4.50. Behind the nursery, behind the fence, which we won't be able to see right now, we have our composting center where we do compost materials, plant materials, both green and brown, usually 1/3 green to 2/3 brown, to make a compost that we use to feed our plants. It makes a great compost. Well, we're back at the building, so it looks like we've reached the end of our tour. So I want to thank you for following along with us through the park, and want to invite you as soon as you're able to visit us at the Valley's oldest nature park in Weslaco, Texas. We're right in the central part of town. See you soon, I hope. Bye now.
Thank you.